Hi, I'm Hannah, and I'm here in my living room in Denver. It's cozy now, filled with light and things I chose, but for most of my life, my space, even my internal space, felt cramped and dictated by others. I used to feel like I was constantly holding my breath, waiting for the next wave of criticism, the next backhanded compliment, the next reminder that I just wasn't quite enough. It was the soundtrack to my life, playing on repeat from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, my family, especially my mother and my older sister. Growing up, and even well into my 30s, it felt like everything I did was scrutinized, measured against some invisible, ever-moving standard I could never meet. If I was quiet, I was told I needed to speak up. If I spoke up, I was told I was being too loud or opinionated. My career choices were questioned, my appearance was subtly, and not so subtly, critiqued, and my life decisions were always subject to a family vote where my opinion seemed to count the least. I spent years trying to earn their approval, their simple, genuine pride, but it always felt just out of reach. Like chasing a mirage in the Colorado heat. There was always a favored one, and it wasn't me. My sister, Chloe, seemed to glide through life, making choices that were celebrated, even when they were impulsive or impractical. Her struggles were met with immediate, overwhelming support. Mine were often met with sighs or lectures on how I could have avoided them if I'd just listened to their advice in the first place. I poured my energy, my time, and yes, often my limited money, into helping them, smoothing things over, being the reliable one. It was exhausting, a constant drain I didn't even realize was depleting me until I was running on empty. I started a health tech company a few years ago. It was born out of a passion for helping people and a refusal to keep banging my head against traditional corporate structures that felt just as stifling as my family dynamics. It was incredibly difficult, demanding every ounce of my resilience and ingenuity. And, of course, my family had plenty to say about that too. More advice, more doubts, more veiled suggestions that I was wasting my time on a pipe dream when I should be focusing on something more sensible. They never truly saw it. Not the vision, not the potential, and certainly not the sheer grit it took to build something from the ground up with minimal resources and zero emotional support from them. It was just another thing Hannah was doing that was probably going to fail, another reason she wasn't living up to whatever arbitrary standard they had set. But then something happened. Something that overnight shifted the ground beneath all of us. Something that made the constant scolding and criticism from my relatives grind to an abrupt, disorienting halt. My health tech company went public. And suddenly, the woman they had dismissed, criticized, and taken for granted was successful. More successful than they had ever imagined. It was a moment that didn't just change my financial status. It ripped the mask off the family dynamics I had lived with for so long and forced me to see the truth, clear and cold, for the first time. This is the story of how that moment, the culmination of years of unseen work and silent pain, finally set me free. Let me know where you're watching from if you've ever felt like you were the overlooked one, constantly seeking approval you never received. I see you. My childhood was a study in contrasts. My mother, Eleanor, was a woman obsessed with appearances and rankings, who had the neatest lawn, whose children got the best grades in the most prestigious subjects, whose daughter married the most suitable man. From the moment I was born, I was slotted into a role, the quiet, serious one, the one who needed guidance, the one who could always be counted on to be sensible, which often meant compliant. Chloe, my older sister by 2 years, was the vibrant one, the social one, the one who effortlessly drew attention. Eleanor basked in Chloe's glow, amplifying her achievements, minimizing her missteps. My achievements, on the other hand, were usually met with a muted nod and then a pivot to something I could do better or something Chloe had done even more spectacularly. I remembered vividly the day I got into the engineering program I'd set my heart on. It was a competitive school, a demanding major. I was bursting with pride, holding the acceptance letter like a winning lottery ticket. I called my mother first. "That's nice, dear," she'd said, her tone lukewarm. "Is that really what you want to do? Engineering? It seems so unfeminine. And isn't it terribly difficult?" Are you sure you're cut out for that? The air went out of me. Instead of congratulations, I got doubt. Instead of pride, I got a lecture on alternative, more appropriate majors. Later that week, Chloe announced she was going to study art history at a local college she barely got into. Eleanor threw a party. My creative girl, she'd beamed, showing off Chloe's acceptance letter as if it were proof of genius. The contrast wasn't subtle, it was a constant, crushing reality. This pattern continued throughout my life. If I got a promotion, it was "that's good, but does it pay well enough? Are you sure it's stable?" If I saved money, it was "you're being too stingy, Hannah. Life is for living, not hoarding." Chloe needs help with rent this month. My careful planning was boring. Chloe's spontaneity was exciting. My responsibility was expected. Chloe's occasional responsibility was lauded as immense growth. Money was a particularly fraught subject. My family, while not impoverished, lived right at the edge of their means, often beyond it, primarily due to impulse spending and a general lack of financial planning, especially on Chloe's part. I was always the one who had a little extra or was good with numbers. This translated into me being the de facto family bank and financial consultant, neither of which I was ever paid for in any currency. "Hannah, honey, could you just spot me for this?" Chloe would ask, batting her eyelashes for everything from new clothes to overdue bills. "Hannah, your sister needs a little help getting back on her feet," Eleanor would state, not ask, when Chloe's latest venture, a failed Etsy shop, a short-lived dog-walking business, a disastrous attempt at selling artisanal candles, inevitably cratered. I always said yes, because saying no felt like tearing the fragile fabric of what little connection we had. Saying no meant facing their disappointment, their thinly veiled accusations of selfishness, their collective cold shoulder. It was easier, or so I thought, to just hand over the money, to fix the problem, to be the reliable one, the invisible safety net. It was the price I paid for a semblance of peace. My first significant financial contribution was helping with the down payment on Chloe's first apartment. She'd been living at home, driving my mother mad, and the only solution, according to Eleanor, was for Chloe to get her own place immediately. Chloe had no savings, no steady job. Eleanor sighed dramatically, wringing her hands. "I just don't know how she'll manage. It's such a shame, she's so sensitive, you know." The unspoken message hung heavy in the air. "You manage, Hannah. You have a stable job. You fix this." I wrote a check for several $1,000s. Chloe gave me a quick hug and promised to pay me back someday. Eleanor just nodded, relieved, already moving on to discussing decorating schemes with Chloe. There was no acknowledgement of the sacrifice, no discussion of terms, just the silent expectation that I would provide, and they would receive. That set a precedent. Over the years, there were countless loans that were never repaid, bills I quietly covered, emergencies that somehow landed squarely in my lap to resolve financially. My own financial goals, saving for a down payment on my own modest condo, building an emergency fund, were constantly derailed by their needs, which always seemed more urgent, more deserving of my resources. My small apartment felt temporary, a place I was just passing through, while I subsidized their stability. The emotional cost was even higher. I was their confidant when they needed to vent, their mediator when they argued, their crisis manager when something went wrong. But when I needed to talk about my own stresses, my own dreams, my own fears, the conversation would inevitably swing back to them, their problems, their feelings. "Oh, Hannah, you think that's bad? Let me tell you what your father did this week," or, "Well, I'm just exhausted. I don't know how I'm going to manage everything with Chloe right now." My emotional landscape was a backdrop for their drama, never the main stage. I learned to keep things to myself, to present a calm, capable exterior, because vulnerability was not invited, only exploited for comparison or dismissed as a burden. Starting the health tech company was an act of quiet rebellion. It was something entirely mine, born from my skills and vision. I poured my life savings into it, worked 70-hour weeks, faced setbacks that felt insurmountable. I shared small victories with my family, hoping, just hoping, for a flicker of genuine interest or pride. Eleanor's reaction was typical. A health app? That sounds complicated. Are you sure you know what you're doing? Your cousin Brenda's boy, he tried starting a business, lost everything. Ended up working retail. It wasn't concern. It was a prediction of failure wrapped in a warning. Chloe was worse. Oh, Hannah's doing her little computer thing, she'd say to relatives, rolling her eyes slightly. It's very niche. Once, she even suggested I hire her to do the creative marketing, which consisted of her wanting to post vague, inspirational quotes on social media, utterly unrelated to health tech. When I gently declined, explaining the need for targeted, evidence-based communication, she accused me of not supporting her. I thought you'd want to help your sister. One particularly painful memory stood out. I had just secured a small seed funding round, a huge milestone after months of pitching and rejections. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was validation, fuel for growth. I called Eleanor, excited. That's nice, dear. Does that mean you can finally get your car properly serviced? That rattling sound worries me. No mention of the funding, the business, the validation. Just the car, which I kept meticulously maintained despite their worries. Later that week, Chloe called, ostensibly to chat. It quickly turned into a request. So, about this funding, does that mean you have some extra cash now? My credit card is maxed out, and I really need this new laptop for my, online courses. It wasn't even a question of need. It was pure want, couched in a flimsy excuse. The money I had worked myself ragged to secure, the lifeline for my fledgling business, they saw only as a personal ATM replenished. It hurt, a deep, cutting pain that they couldn't see the magnitude of what I was trying to build, only what I could provide them. I started withdrawing emotionally. The constant requests for money, the casual dismissal of my work, the relentless focus on their own lives, it was a shield, protecting my dwindling reserves of self-worth. I still showed up for family dinners, still answered the phone, but I stopped sharing anything important. My business became a secret, my struggles private. It was lonely, but less painful than offering up my efforts only to have them belittled or immediately followed by a financial demand. The stress of running the company, combined with the emotional weight of my family dynamics, started taking a physical toll. I was perpetually exhausted, my sleep was fractured, and I developed a nervous tremor in my hands. My doctor told me I needed to reduce stress, suggested therapy. I knew the source of the stress wasn't just the startup life. It was the invisible labor of managing my family's expectations and demands while trying to build my own future. But how could I explain that to them? How could I tell my mother that her constant criticism felt like a physical blow, or my sister that her entitled requests felt like theft? I couldn't. So I just kept going, pushing through the exhaustion, the anxiety, the quiet despair. I felt trapped, a capable person in a gilded cage built by obligation and a desperate, lingering hope for love that felt conditional on my compliance and utility. There were moments, fleeting ones, when I considered walking away entirely, cutting ties. But the guilt was a powerful tether. They were family. You didn't just abandon family, did you? Even if they hurt you, even if they didn't see you, even if they treated you like a resource rather than a person. The narrative they had woven, that I was inherently serious and needed their light-hearted guidance, that I was perhaps a bit cold and needed their warmth, that I was capable and therefore obligated to help those less so, read, Chloe, was deeply ingrained. I questioned my own perceptions. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I did need their advice, even if it felt like criticism. Maybe I should be happy to help my sister. The years of reinforcement had done their work. Their voices were louder in my head than my own. The year leading up to the IPO was a blur of work. My team was incredible, dedicated, and they believed in the mission. It was the first time I felt truly seen and valued for my capabilities. This external validation started to chip away at the internal narrative my family had built. I saw how healthy relationships functioned, based on mutual respect, shared goals, celebration of success, and support during failure. It highlighted, in stark contrast, the dysfunction I had accepted as normal. I rarely talked about the company with my family during this time. If they asked, I gave vague answers. It's going well, lots of work, they didn't press. They were too busy with Chloe's latest venture, a multi-level marketing scheme selling questionable wellness products. Eleanor was convinced this was Chloe's ticket to millions, pouring her own limited funds into buying inventory and attending expensive, rah-rah conferences. Chloe called me frequently during this period, not to see how I was, but to try and recruit me into her downline. Hannah, seriously, you have to get in on this now. It's going to explode. You're so good with people, you'd be amazing, she chirped, completely oblivious or indifferent to the fact that I was running an actual, venture-backed tech company. When I patiently explained that I was happy with my career path and didn't have time for pyramid schemes, she'd become cold, accusing me of thinking I was better than her. Just because you have your fancy tech job now, you've changed, Hannah. You used to be supportive, in her vocabulary, meant doing whatever she wanted me to do. The final months before the IPO were intense. Regulatory filings, investor roadshows, fine-tuning the business plan. Sleep was a luxury. My family was a distant echo. They called about trivial things, expected me at family events I was too swamped to attend, and guilt-tripped me when I declined, and occasionally asked if I could lend Chloe some money because her business expenses were piling up faster than her residual income. I started saying no more often, small, shaky no's that felt monumental to me. I can't right now, I'm really tied up with work. I didn't offer explanations or apologies. It felt terrifying and liberating all at once. The day of the IPO arrived like a dream. We were in New York, standing on the Nasdaq floor. The bell rang, the stock started trading, and the numbers, they climbed rapidly. My phone, which had been mostly silent from my family for weeks, suddenly exploded. Missed calls, texts, notifications from news articles they were sharing. It wasn't just successful, it was visibly, quantifiably successful on a scale they couldn't ignore or minimize. My quiet, niche, little tech thing was suddenly worth hundreds of millions, billions on paper. And a significant chunk of that belonged to me. I stood there, surrounded by my team, the cheers echoing, the confetti falling, and felt a strange mix of elation and shock. And then, beneath that, a cold, hard realization settling in my gut. This wasn't just a professional triumph, it was a seismic shift in my personal world. The dynamic that had defined my relationship with my family for decades had just shattered. The overlooked, criticized daughter, the reliable ATM, the sensible sister who wasn't quite as vibrant or exciting as Chloe, was now undeniably, publicly, financially successful. What would that mean? How would they react? I already had a sinking suspicion I knew. The calls started immediately. Not congratulations, not really. The first text, just minutes after the opening bell, was from Chloe. OMG, Hannah. Did you see? So crazy. Call me ASAP. No mention of my hard work, my company, my achievement. It was OMG, crazy, and a demand for immediate attention. It felt like she was claiming the event, making it about the general craziness of the stock market rather than my specific success. Eleanor called moments later, her voice trembling with an emotion I couldn't immediately place. Was it pride? Ah, Hannah? Oh, Hannah, honey, is that true? What they're saying on the news? Your company, it went public? My goodness. Well, isn't that something? Her voice was tight, strained. I always knew you were capable, dear. Very capable. Just sometimes a little serious even in this moment. The serious descriptor, the subtle qualification, slipped in. Then came the pivot. You must be exhausted. All that work. You know, Chloe was just saying she was thinking about getting a new car. Her old one is so unreliable. The transition was breathtakingly smooth, from my multi-million-dollar IPO to Chloe's hypothetical car needs. It was less than 5 minutes into this new reality, and the pattern was already reasserting itself, just with bigger numbers attached. Over the next few days, the calls and texts continued, their tone shifting rapidly from feigned casualness to fawning admiration, always circling back to veiled or direct requests. We should celebrate properly, Hannah. A family dinner. My treat, of course, Eleanor chirped, a stark contrast to the countless times I'd picked up the check without comment. Just us. We can catch up. Chloe was wondering if you had any investment advice for her. Investment advice. From the sister who just poured thousands into an MLM scheme. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. Other relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly materialized, sending gushing messages about how they'd always believed in me. They hadn't, how proud they were, they weren't, and how wonderful it would be to reconnect. They wanted something. Cousins I barely knew were asking if I could help them get a job at my company. Distant aunts were calling Eleanor asking about my plans for my wealth. The most telling interactions were with Chloe. She oscillated between effusive praise, "You're like a tech mogul now. So cool," and bizarre attempts to minimize my success while emphasizing her own perceived potential. "It's just paper money, right?" she asked one day, as if trying to convince herself. Like, it's not real cash yet, is it? Another time, she launched into a detailed explanation of how her MLM business was just about to hit critical mass and how her potential earnings were actually much higher than anything I could make in a traditional job. She seemed genuinely uncomfortable with my success, trying to frame it within her limited understanding or pivot back to her own, less impressive reality. She sent me links to expensive cars, houses, and designer clothes, with messages like, "This would look so good on you," or "You have to get this now." It wasn't about celebrating me, it was about projecting her own materialistic desires onto my new financial reality. It felt performative, a superficial engagement with the idea of my wealth, completely disconnected from the years of work and sacrifice it represented. I felt a profound sadness watching this unfold. It wasn't the money itself that mattered most to me, it was the validation of my work, the security it provided, the freedom it offered. But to them, it seemed it was only the money. The person I was, the values I held, the struggle I had endured, none of that seemed to register in the face of the dollar signs now attached to my name. The love felt conditional before. Now it felt transparently transactional. I took a step back. I stopped answering calls immediately. I let texts sit. I needed space to process, to breathe, to decide how I was going to navigate this new, bizarre landscape. The years of silently absorbing their criticism, of trying to mold myself into the person they seemed to want, of sacrificing my own needs, it all crashed down on me. I saw the pattern with horrifying clarity. I was valuable to them only insofar as I served their needs, emotional or financial. My success hadn't earned me genuine respect, it had just made me a more valuable resource to be exploited. Therapy became a crucial lifeline during this time. My therapist, Dr. Ramirez, helped me untangle the knots of guilt, obligation, and ingrained people-pleasing. We talked about the family system, the roles we were assigned, the unhealthy dynamics I had participated in out of a longing for belonging and acceptance. She helped me see that their behavior wasn't a reflection of my worth, but a reflection of their own limitations and issues. She validated my feelings of hurt, anger, and betrayal, feelings I had buried for so long. "You were always the reliable one, the capable one," she said gently during one session. "That's not a flaw, Hannah. It's a strength." But they treated it like an obligation. Like you owed them that reliability, that capability, that support, without receiving anything in return. "But they're family," I whispered, the old programming kicking in. "You're supposed to help family." "Yes," she agreed. "Healthy families support each other, Hannah. Mutually." What you experienced wasn't mutual support. It was one-sided extraction. That word, extraction, resonated deeply. It described perfectly how I felt, like something was being pulled from me, constantly, without regard for my own well-being or sustainability. Empowered by these sessions, I started experimenting with boundaries. Small ones at first. Declining dinner invitations that felt like performance opportunities for them to show off my success. Not responding instantly to financial requests. Gently redirecting conversations that focused solely on money. Their reactions were swift and telling. Eleanor became passive-aggressive. "Oh, you're just so busy now, aren't you? I understand. It must be hard. Being so important," Chloe sulked and accused me of being stuck up. Other relatives complained to Eleanor that I wasn't being generous enough, and she, instead of defending me, relayed their complaints, adding her own sigh of agreement. The expectation wasn't that I would live my life or even use my success to build my own security. It was that I would immediately redistribute my newfound wealth to solve all their problems and fund all their desires. One afternoon, Eleanor called with another request. Chloe needed to replace her roof, a large, unexpected expense. Eleanor, without preamble, launched into a lengthy explanation of how Chloe just didn't have the funds, how important it was, how stressful it was for her poor daughter. The sum she mentioned was significant, tens of thousands of dollars. It was more than the down payment I'd given Chloe years ago, more than all the accumulated loans combined. I listened patiently until she finished. Took a deep breath. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice calm but firm. "I'm sorry to hear about Chloe's roof. That sounds stressful." A pause. Expectancy. "But I won't be paying for it." Silence on the other end. A long, stunned silence. Then, Eleanor's voice, sharp with disbelief and outrage. "You won't? Hannah, what are you talking about? It's your sister. She needs help. You have the means now. How can you be so selfish?" Selfish. The word hit me, familiar and stinging, but this time it didn't buckle me. "Mom, I helped Chloe for years," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I gave her money countless times, money I needed for my own life, my own future. None of it was ever repaid. My help was always expected, never appreciated as a gift. And through all of that, neither you nor Chloe ever showed genuine interest in my life, my struggles, or my business. Not until it became clear I had money." "That's not fair," she cried, her voice rising. "We love you. We worry about you being too serious, too focused on work. We want you to be happy." "Happy?" I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping me. "Do you think constantly being asked for money, having my work dismissed, and being criticized for simply being myself made me happy, Mom? Do you think watching you celebrate Chloe for doing the bare minimum while you nitpicked everything I did made me happy?" The dam had broken. Years of repressed pain poured out, not in shouts, but in a steady, measured indictment. My success didn't suddenly make me obligated to bail everyone out, Mom. It gave me security I never had because I was always giving everything away. It gave me the freedom to finally say no. And I'm saying no now. Chloe needs to figure this out herself, or you can help her. But it won't be me this time." Eleanor was furious. She accused me of being cold, heartless, forgetting where I came from. She brought up every past favor she had ever done for me, distorting them into debts I owed. She threatened to tell other family members how I was behaving. I listened for a while, then calmly stated my boundary again. "My decision is final, Mom. I'm not paying for the roof." "Fine," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "If that's how you're going to be, Hannah, don't expect us to just be here whenever you decide you want family." She hung up. The silence that followed was deafening, but different from the silence of keeping things inside. This was the silence of a space cleared, a battle fought, a boundary held. My hand was trembling, my heart pounding, but beneath the fear, a fierce, unfamiliar feeling was stirring: pride. I had done it. I had said no. I had stood up for myself. Chloe's reaction was a torrent of angry texts and voicemails. She called me a cruel bitch, a traitor, a greedy monster. She said I had obviously forgotten my humble beginnings and was letting money change me. She conveniently forgot every dollar I had ever given her, every time I had been there for her when Eleanor was exasperated, every time I had smoothed things over. Her entitlement had reached a fever pitch, fueled by the belief that my wealth existed solely for her benefit. I didn't engage. I blocked her number. The negativity, the accusations, the sheer venom. I didn't need it in my life anymore. Walking away from the constant conflict, the expectation of being their perpetual safety net, was incredibly difficult. there was a period of mourning, not for the family I had, but for the family I had desperately wished I had. A family that saw me, valued me for who I was, celebrated my successes unconditionally, and supported me through my struggles without keeping score. That family didn't exist, and it never would. Accepting that was painful, a deep ache of lost hope. But as the weeks passed, the silence from their end began to feel less like punishment and more like peace. The constant low-level anxiety I had lived with for decades started to dissipate. I slept better. The tremor in my hands lessened. I started making decisions based on what I wanted, what was good for me, not on how it would be perceived or whether it would inconvenience my family. I bought a beautiful, quiet condo with large windows and mountain views, a place that felt truly like mine. I invested wisely, not just for financial growth, but for security, ensuring I would never again be in a position where I felt obligated to sacrifice my own stability for others who wouldn't do the same for me. I focused on my company, on my team, on the mission that actually mattered to me. My friendships deepened. I connected with people who valued reciprocity, who celebrated my successes with genuine joy, who offered support without expectation. I discovered the quiet pleasure of living a life free from constant judgment and financial pressure. I could breathe. Occasionally, a message would slip through from Eleanor, usually a brief, formal note about a holiday or a distant relative's event. There were no more requests for money, no more direct criticisms. There was a cautious distance, a cold civility that had replaced the toxic entanglement. It wasn't warmth, but it wasn't pain either. It was neutral. And for now, neutral felt like a profound victory. Chloe remained blocked. I heard through the grapevine that her MLM scheme had, unsurprisingly, fizzled out. My success hadn't fixed my family. It hadn't magically transformed them into the supportive, loving unit I had always craved. In fact, it had highlighted the depth of their issues and the transactional nature of their love. But my success had given me the power to change my relationship with them. It had given me the leverage, the financial independence, and, crucially, the internal strength I needed to finally prioritize myself. The constant scolding hadn't stopped because they approved of me or my money. It had stopped because I had removed myself from the line of fire. I had built a shield of self-worth and practical boundaries that their criticism and demands could no longer penetrate. It wasn't an overnight fix. The healing was a process, slow and sometimes painful, working through years of conditioning and hurt. But the IPO was the undeniable catalyst, the event that ripped away the facade and forced me to confront the reality of my family dynamics and my place within them. It gave me the jolt I needed to realize that their approval was never coming and that my worth was not, and had never been, dependent on their validation or my utility to them. I learned that walking away from toxic dynamics, even with family, isn't a failure of love, but an act of self-preservation. It's choosing your own well-being over a distorted, painful version of connection. The money was a tool, yes, a powerful one, but the real wealth was the self-respect and freedom I gained. I no longer felt like the overlooked, criticized girl from Denver. I was Hannah, capable, independent, at peace. And that, unlike any stock price, was invaluable. So, that's my story. It's not a fairy tale where success fixes everything and everyone suddenly loves you the way you always wanted. Sometimes, success just gives you the power to see the truth more clearly and the means to build a life on your own terms, away from the toxicity. It was incredibly painful to realize that the family I had invested so much in, emotionally and financially, couldn't celebrate my success without immediately trying to claim a piece of it, or worse, trying to minimize it. It was a confirmation of fears I had held deep down for years. But it was also liberating. The constant feeling of being less than, of needing to prove myself, of walking on eggshells, that's gone now. It didn't disappear overnight with the IPO, but the IPO gave me the ability to create the distance and boundaries necessary for it to fade. I learned that my worth isn't tied to how useful I am to others or how much they approve of me. My worth just is. It's inherent. And that realization is more valuable than any amount of money. If you've been in a similar situation, feeling overlooked, criticized, or used by people close to you, maybe my story resonates. It's hard, I know. The guilt, the hope, the fear of being alone, they're powerful forces. But your well-being matters. Your peace matters. You don't owe anyone your happiness or your resources at the expense of your own soul. Learning to set boundaries is a process, and it's okay if it's messy or if you stumble. The important thing is that you start listening to yourself, trusting your own instincts, and prioritizing your own needs. You are capable, you are worthy, and you deserve to build a life where you are seen, respected, and valued for who you are, not just for what you can provide. Thank you for listening. If this story spoke to you, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. Share your own experiences in the comments below. Let's build a community of support. And remember, your story isn't over. You have the power to change the narrative. You are stronger than you think.